Hello YouTube, this is Antierxon and welcome to my channel. Today I am going to show you my attempt at reaching Eve and also trying to lift off from Eve and then return home. It's an attempt that was almost a disaster. It's actually only on the third time that I managed to try and succeed. But this is my spaceship. This is basically, it contains several parts. This is me exploring it. And it's a very large spaceship. However, the actual takeoff capsule is relatively small. It also has two satellite-like attachments to it, and one of them is for a return flight to Kerbin. This is where Jebediah Kerbonaut just took off from, and the other one is sort of like an exploration ship that I decided to keep orbiting around Eve and possibly land on Eve's moon. Now, this is me trying to set up basically an approach path to Eve, and this is a spaceship that I just detached from the main spaceship and trying to basically enter this one first into the orbit around Eve, and this will then retrieve my astronaut when he takes off from Eve, because I don't think he'll have enough fuel to even escape the gravity of Eve. I mean, he'll have enough fuel to basically reach the orbit, but not enough to escape. So I'm retrieving the solar panels because I'm about to enter the Eve's atmosphere, and both of these spaceships will actually undergo air braking maneuver just so they can enter an orbit around Eve and can then retrieve my Jebediah Kerbonaut. Or is that someone? No, sorry, it's not Jebediah Kerbonaut. It's Duffy Kerbonaut. It's the little brother of Jebediah Kerbonaut. So both of these ships are actually really well, at least I think they were really well made. They have 4 solar panels. Only 2 are required to control the ship, and 2 are basically sort of like the backups. And now I'm going to use my astronaut to attach him to the main platform. He's basically just going to sit on this chair and control everything from here. This is the platform that's going to be landing on Eve, and this is the tiny one that's going to retrieve him from Eve. So here's Eve, and I'm gonna retrieve my last panel in a second and prepare for my first air braking maneuver for my smaller spaceship. So this is the one that's going to either retrieve him later or possibly just orbit around Eve and its moon. Because I did bring 2, I only created 2 because it was kind of balanced in terms of weight distribution, and I had nowhere else to put them. They had to be on the side, so I decided to take 2 just in case. And as you will later find out, it was actually a really good idea, because I did screw up and ran out of battery in one of the spaceships and could not retrieve my panels without the battery. It was actually this one that I'm trying to air brake with. So it still has some battery left, but unfortunately, because I didn't put any solar panels on the sides and I only put the retrievable solar panels, it eventually runs out of battery and you are unable to control it. So I'll have to use the other spaceship where there's another pilot inside to come to the rescue, but this will be at the end of the video. Meanwhile, let's just try to land on Eve. So this is our big, huge motherlode spaceship that I believe I called Spider Crawler thingy, and it is actually not very difficult to land, because I've tested this on Kerbin many times, and basically if you attach a sort of like a hexagon shaped side panels without any, like, what do you call them, the extension panels that have no fuel in them, and then you put a metal bar on the bottom, it actually can survive falls of up to 50 meters per second. So it's a very stable design. It bounces off basically from the ground very easily and lands on its all 6 feet almost every time. So it's a really good design. It has enough parachutes to land on Eve and enough to survive any fall. And as you'll see, I'll actually be doing this 3 times, and all 3 times it lands successfully, even when I make some serious mistakes. But this is the landing maneuver. Actually, no, this is actually me air braking. This is the first maneuver where I air brake, and I then try to land using my parachutes. Unfortunately, the first attempt was on the dark side. I couldn't really control my landing as well as I could on Kerbin, because I don't really know enough math to calculate the descent here, so it was kind of a random hit. And unfortunately, this first attempt is almost entirely on the bottom of the planet, so essentially it's not going to support me in terms of saving some fuel. But if you do launch from the bottom of the planet, basically from the sea level, it requires a lot of fuel on your part. and it's actually one of the most difficult maneuvers in Kerbin's Kerbal Space Program. So here's me landing. I think I only needed 4 parachutes to land the entire craft safely, and as you can see, it's landing pretty evenly onto the surface. I think the only concern I have with this craft so far is that for some reason my chair is not entirely aligned with the rest of the ship, so when there's only one stage left, it's a little bit difficult to control, but this is something I'll resolve in future designs. And here's me landing, and 3, 2, 1, and touchdown. Very, very nicely, bouncy bounce, and absolutely safe. So, really good design in terms of landing. The only badly designed part is the ladders and the, that part. So it's really hard to get off the ship without injuring yourself, and it's really hard to get back on it. But it just requires a bit of arcade-like jumping across the engines and across the fuel tanks. So here's Duffy, Kerbin on the planet, and there's a bunch of ladders I attached to the side. And this was actually, this is something I did not calculate. Apparently ladders, because of the light, they do spend some battery, they waste some battery. So I should have attached more solar panels. Actually, I did not attach any solar panels here. And what I realized later is that my ship actually ran out of energy. It ran out of battery. And because it had no battery, and because it only has a chair on top, and actually a remote control device that has just a little bit of control in it. Oh yeah, by the way, this is a takeoff. I'm just gonna show you what the takeoff was like. There's a stage here that was on basically the landing struts with the parachutes, and the rest is just a spaceship. So this is it taking off. It has really good TWR. It can take off really fast from the planet. But yeah, so the battery is drained by the remote control thingamajig, and by the time that I get to relatively high height, it unfortunately has 0 battery left, so it's impossible to control, and you'll see that in a second. But the takeoff itself is actually absolutely brilliant. It's very stable, very maneuverable, has really good TWR, and I'm basically using the smallest engines and the smallest tanks. And it's sort of like a hexagon-like design, but it's also using the asparagus model, of course, just to save as much fuel as possible. The delta V on this spaceship is approximately 14,000 meters per second, so you can take off from any point on Eve and successfully reach orbit with just enough fuel left to maybe maneuver just a little bit and get into a nice circular orbit so that another spaceship can pick you up. And this was really my plan. I was actually planning to pick up my courageous astronaut with one of my ion engine powered attachment spaceships that I brought with me, and it did work in the end, but unfortunately it was a lot of trial and error. But here comes the part that I miscalculated. So the ship is still kind of maneuverable because it still has enough engines and enough power to give itself enough balance, but as I'm losing more and more engines, my ship becomes a little bit wobbly, and it's about to become even more wobbly, and things are about to get very interesting as I lose a few lost engines. And this is actually, like, the speed is really nice, the height is pretty good, my delta V is absolutely excellent, but unfortunately as I approach this height, suddenly realize, my balancy thingy, my SAS, is no longer able to balance me. There's no longer momentum inside the remote control thingamajig, so my ship just starts wobbling like crazy. It first flies normally, but then as I reach a certain height, as I reach a certain speed, because there's no way to control this ship, it starts wobbling a little bit, then starts wobbling a little bit more, and the higher I get, the more it wobbles. So unfortunately this design suffers from the lack of battery power, and this is something I should have kind of anticipated, but I didn't. I was trying to save as much, basically I was, out of battery, but basically I was trying to save my weights just for, add a little bit of extra fuel, just because I wanted to have the extra delta V. But yeah, so it didn't work. Second attempt, so here's me landing again, and you'll see this time I'm landing a little bit worse than the first time, but it still is able to land pretty nicely. So every time I try to land this beautiful but yet creepy creation. It actually lands really nicely. So in terms of landing, it's brilliant. In terms of takeoff, it's pretty good too, until the part where it's really hard to control the ship. So you can see on the side there, that's my the control tanks basically that I used to slow down. I guess you can call them retrograde thrusters, but I do use them a lot, mostly for slowing down, for for some maneuvering before landing, and they are quite useful even though the tank is relatively large. Here I was kind of actually scared that I'm gonna land in the water, and that would probably not be very good, because I basically landed right next to the water, which is even worse because it's literally sea level. This is literally sea level. It does not get worse than that in terms of saving Delta V, because this is the worst possible landing spot. Landing right on the beach. And this was all random. I didn't even plan this. I don't even know how that happened, but there you go. And it's sort of landing sideways, so you can see there's a bit of an inclination, but look how nicely it lands. Look at how nicely and beautifully it lands. And so these struts on the bottom that I have, I mean the metal bars that I used, they were perfect for bouncing. So my next attempt at taking off goes really well at first as well. It goes relatively well, and everything is just beautiful. I was so happy about being on the bright side, landing near the ocean, being able to take off, being able to finally get into orbit, and kind of saving a little bit of battery. So I was just kind of crossing my fingers that I'll have enough battery to survive this trip. So let's see how it goes, because honestly at this point this was all just a gamble, because my battery was still draining and I was still trying really hard. You can see that right here, it's actually it's draining pretty fast, and I was trying really hard to kind of save as much battery as I could, because I just needed it for this last maneuver when I get to the part where it's really hard to control the ship. And but yeah, you can see that overall making a hexagon-ish shape for a spaceship to take off from Eve is actually probably one of the better, more stable designs. And also using smaller engines, unlike the bigger engines that I used in my first attempt to land on Eve, is actually a much better idea. Firstly, because it weighs way less, and secondly because you can actually achieve a much higher Delta V than you could with bigger engines. And yes, bigger engines do look much better, and they're kind of pretty awesome, and they sound better, and they control a little bit better, and it's a lot more difficult to lose control in higher atmosphere. But with smaller engines, you just get so much more maneuverability and so much more Delta V that really I think there's no planet that you cannot escape. Except for obviously, except for Joule, there's no other planet that you cannot escape using this sort of a design. Now here's me losing my last few engines, and this is basically one of my last few stages. Actually, there's 3 more stages, but this is my main stage to pick up speed and to accelerate away from Eve's atmosphere and get into a nice circular orbit. And usually, at least in theory, this should work really well, because I kind of calculate everything perfectly. I believe at around 30,000 meters I usually start kind of taking a more angular approach. So you'll see that at approximately at approximately 30,000, this is when I start turning, because Eve's atmosphere is obviously a little bit higher than Kerbin atmosphere, but you do want to escape the lower atmosphere as soon as possible, because that's where all of the friction is, that's where all of the atmospheric thickness is. Anyway, so this is me again flipping and going sideways, and even though I'm a lot higher this time, I still ran out of battery, so I needed to change my approach, and this was not really working out well. So there you go. This is Mr. Duffy Kerbin landing upside down, and he's really happy about it. I don't know if you noticed, but he's actually really happy about this situation. So this is what happens when you land on Eve upside down. And attempt number 3. So attempt number 3 actually did not start as well either. I actually lost one of my parachutes during the atmospheric stage, so that was not a good start. And I was not really looking forward to this, because I was also landing on a mountain range sideways on an inclination, and it was actually the opposite way. So things could not have started worse. Luckily, this is at least 5,000 or so meters in the air, so it was at least a little bit better than before. But here I decided to keep my boosting stage and kind of lose some speed before landing, because that could have at least meant that I would not be in jeopardy of destroying my ship. So this is me burning my last stage before releasing it and trying to desperately land in one piece. I'm going to release my last stage, and just like that, almost 90 degrees. And look at that. Look at how beautiful, how awesome this landing stage is. It lands on its side and it survives, and it's still good to go. I have not lost a single engine. So this is a design that I'm definitely going to pursue in future models as well, because this is amazingly stable. So here's me releasing my engines, my last, sorry, this is not engine, this is just like the landing struts that I made. Homemade landing struts, and releasing them and basically launching from what, 5,000 meter height. Now this means that I will have a lot more delta V to spare. Also means that I can avoid at least 5,000 meters of really thick EVE atmosphere and can take my time taking off. So here I decided to decrease my takeoff velocity a little bit and just, you know, make it a little bit slower, but at the same time a little bit more stable, and really try to save that fuel. So I believe I disabled the guidance system, even though it was probably a bad idea. It's really hard to control the ship without the guidance system, but I decided to, you know, save battery instead. So here's me disabling it just for now, and I do re-enable it later on, but for the time being I was basically controlling the ship manually, just like a pro. As I took off from EVE, I actually realized that, well, this is a really fun mission. This is actually a mission that I totally recommend that you try if you haven't tried this in Kerbal Space Program yet, because this is so challenging. I mean, there are obviously more challenging missions, like for example, trying to do the grand tour over every planet and land on every planet and then come back to Kerbin. But you know, for someone who played the game under 1 year, and for someone who enjoys the challenge. Oh yeah, here's me losing an engine but still surviving the flippage. One of the engines landed on my ship and stuck to the side, so they actually changed the weight distribution. But I managed to kind of get over that dangerous maneuver and still continued burning into the upper atmosphere. But yes, the EVE mission is actually one of the most fun missions that you can do in KSP, because it is really challenging, and actually succeeding at taking off from EVE and then landing back on Kerbin is one of the most rewarding feeling you'll feel in any video game. So anyway, so I'm about to basically escape the lower atmosphere, and this is where things get more interesting, because I still have enough energy to control the ship, and I still have enough fuel to get away from here once and for all. And this is why Duffy Kerbin is so happy, because we can actually finally reach an apoapsis that will take us away from here, away from here. So I'm actually really happy about this. I get really excited. I started pushing my engines to their max, and at this point I think this is when I was certain that the mission is going to be a success. So here I only need to reach approximately 100-something kilometers, because EVE's atmosphere starts around 100-ish, and if you get to 100-120, that's when you can be pretty safe, that you know you won't be air braking anymore. And at this point I'm just going to take turn off my electric thingy just to save the last bits of electricity, and take a really horizontal position and blast my engines to their fullest speed until I reach a circular orbit, because that's what I want, and that's what will help me to be captured by my spaceship. And he's so happy, and I'm really happy, and then everyone's really happy, because this is finally a success. Now there is, however, another problem. Another problem is that, like I said before, I forgot to turn on the solar panels on my other recovery spaceship. So I actually had to do something really silly. I had to use my first spaceship with a pilot in it, take it to my second spaceship, and then I had to literally manually retrieve the solar panels. You'll see me doing that in a second. So this is one of the Kerbins trying to reach the other spaceship. So this was like a double trouble kind of a situation where things just kept going wrong, and everything that could go wrong went wrong. But luckily I was able to achieve an orbit, even though I kind of wasted fuel, but I was able to achieve an orbit and get close enough to that other spaceship, retrieve its panels, and then take an orbit very close to Duffy Kerbin, retrieve him, and return back to Kerbin. Now those things I'm not going to show you in this video because it's already getting too long, but that was the simple part, because all you had to do is reach Kerbin, basically escape Eve orbit and get to the Kerbin orbit and then land. But this is me getting to the spider ship thingy and saving my Duffy Kerbin. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please subscribe to my channel, check out some of the other videos. Game you later, alligators. The hardest part is done. Bye bye.